Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Little Mermaid from 1989. The Little Mermaid was looked at as kind of the continued success of animation in a post Roger Rabbit world. Roger Rabbit was considered the film that brought animation back into the forefront, and Little Mermaid was looked at as the film that would reap those rewards. Now, granted, Oliver and Company and Land Before Time came out before this movie, but that is the narrative that both people at the time felt, because The Little Mermaid was considered so good and such a return to form since the classic Disney films that all those critics, particularly baby boomers and people have been seeing over the years. And so it was looked at as like animation is really back. Disney is back to the form they used to be. The other reason for that is, and I think people sort of forget about this part, it was the first princess film in 30 years. That's right, unless you consider Duchess for Aristocats or want to take some creative license with Maid Marian and Robin Hood, this is the first Disney film that is titled after a princess and is following a princess protagonist. You'd say even longer because Sleeping Beauty is like sort of about a bunch of other stuff. But The Little Mermaid was, in all seriousness, the first movie to make, I guess, a Disney princess in 30 years. And so I think I didn't see much about that in the advertising or even the reviews at the time, but when you consider how people looked at this as a return to form, that had to be a major part of it. It was a watershed moment. It was the beginning of the Disney Renaissance, ending off the 80s and starting in the 90s, which would be a pretty amazing decade for animation as a whole. This is, of course, directed by, I think, two of the greatest animation directors of all time, and probably two of the greatest directors of all time as well, John Musker and Ron Clements. This is the kind of the film that really set them off. They would direct half of the Disney Renaissance, this and Aladdin. I consider the Disney Renaissance 4 movies. If you want to throw some other stuff in there, have fun, but this was basically the Disney Renaissance, these four. They really, I think, directed the hell out of this movie. So much so, there's parts in this where I realized I don't know certain information, and I have never cared about that, like, ever. Not at all. None at all. Like, what is Ursula's character's name when she becomes, like, the lady who falls in love with Eric? I'm sure there is one, and I'm sure you'll respond in the comments with it. Have fun. But, like, I've never known it at all, ever, and it's never mattered to me, and yet I completely understand the film. Same with, like, when King Triton comes into Ariel's, like, weird grotto human collection thing, he doesn't mention any of the collectibles. He just gets mad at her about the human thing and starts zapping stuff. We naturally assume Sebastian told him about that, I guess. And, like, you don't even, like, I never questioned it. And I was like, oh, yeah, what? He's just, like, I don't know. Does he even know that stuff's there? Like, I have no indication. There's no dialogue about that. I get the statue thing because he's yelling about the dude and he's, like, saying, Daddy, I love him and all that stuff. But the rest of the crap, he doesn't even mention. And it's like the direction is so fine and economical and so smart, but the exact emotions of the story, you don't even think about it, because their direction is so precise in what you need to know for this film. And I think that's one of the things they're very good at, is not only getting the emotions of these characters and projecting on them and having, like, and what a perfect story to have it on with the Little Mermaid thing. Starting, I think this was the first I Want kind of song moment, which all these other films would take from after Howard Ashman and Alan Menken would do with that song and setting that precedent. But so much of this is about following your dreams, so much, like, from Ariel to Aladdin to Tiana to Hercules to even Moana. They all have that moment, but I think those are all Ron Clements and John Musker movies, if you didn't know, sorry. To me, it's that, and what I think works on this, and, you know, I saw this when I was a kid. I was a little kid when this came out, and I was a little kid during the Disney Renaissance, and to be perfectly honest, that is, like, you know, people say there's certain, oh, it was great being a kid, but, like, holy shit, that was pretty cool. You know, Pogs were okay, but Disney Renaissance was amazing. When I was a kid, and this isn't a, like, I'm beyond gender thing or something, like, I literally didn't really think about how this was, like, a girls' movie considered. I know Jeffrey Katzenberg was concerned about that until there was, like, a Tiger Electronics game and it was all in pink, and I was like, oh, this is for girls. But before that, I just thought, she wants something. She wants to be human. Like, at an emotional level, it connected to me. And I think it connects to you as an audience. And even now, as a dad who's like in his late 30s, I was watching Part of Your World, even though I've heard it so many times from my mom's car stereo and cassette, in the late 80s, early 90s, my daughter singing in the bathtub so many times. But when I was listening to it, it just struck me as like this kind of emotion, this universal emotion that you want to be part of, this thing that you've always wanted and you feel so far away and you're so enraptured in it. And that could be so many different things. It kind of reminds me of like even the metaphor of like X-Men or something, where it's like, yes, it could be about this and it could be about that, and neither of you are wrong, but it hits that kind of universal emotion where she wants to be part of the human world and she cannot because of the society she's in, because she doesn't know how, because it seems impossible. And I think that is what Howard Ashman and Ron Clements and John Musker as well, with that direction, like when she's reaching out in that whole, oh my god, I heard they were going to cut that thing, and that is the dumbest fucking decision I've ever heard in my fucking life. Are you serious? You're going to cut Part of Your World? Why don't you just make a different movie? Fucking idiots. Whoever said that, I think it was Katzenberg. That guy's a jerk. To me, like, one of the things that works about this and why Part of Your World is so powerful is because this movie, and this is like what I love about Ron Clements and John Musker and Howard Ashman, is they understood, storytelling wise, you have to stick that landing, or when she can't talk for a little bit, there's no way you can reach her emotion. You have to have reached the audience emotionally. You can feel like you can see into her soul and you understand what she wants out of life. And so every motivation you understand and can relate to and listen to, and how much it means to you. And that is like, oh, so powerful. And just like the fact that these guys got the intense direction, what you need to do with this so well. It really moves at such a great pace. I think the other thing is their direction feels noticeably modern, more like Spielberg in this kind of big blockbuster kind of thing, particularly with the big, third act conclusion fight thing, which you could say Sleeping Beauty did as well, but I think they do it is in a post-Lucas Spielberg world, let's say. This movie, I don't think I need to tell you what it's about, but it's about Ariel, who is a little mermaid who wants to be a human. She then sees Eric, who is a prince. She falls in love with him. And then she makes a deal with a sea witch, Ursula, to become a human so she can fall in love with him, but she has to give up her voice. So then she goes to the real world and has to sort of fall in love with him within 3 days, or she will be trapped in Ursula's thing. Is like a weird sea plant thing, and she does it and tries to fall in love with Eric, and complications ensue. This film, I think its release is actually fairly interesting, and why I keep bringing it up is because it was looked at, and I actually watched the Siskel and Ebert thing, talked about how this almost solidifies that animation is back, or is a major force to be dealing with in the late 80s, and most reviews you can find bring that up specifically. This was very much looked at, and I've heard from animation history teachers and people who were around in animation at the time mention there's Roger Rabbit, and then this happened a year later. I agree, Land Before Time is also a great film. I do think this film is far more impactful to the general public, and commercially and culturally. I think it also showed people sort of, as much as people hate on Disney all the time forever, and rightfully so, wanted that great animation studio to come back. They were the first ones to do features, make them commercially successful, and seeing them come back, I think, was, and maybe this is a bit of a shill thing or something, I think most of the public was happy to see it, regardless of what you think of that. And having them be bested by Don Bluth the year before, both, I think, culturally and, like box office wise, with Land Before Time, really said something. The other thing, this did get released at the same time as All Dogs Go to Heaven, but this definitely beat it. I think Little Mermaid's a stronger film than All Dogs Go to Heaven. Sorry, All Dogs Go to Heaven. As well as I think Little Mermaid was handled better post its release, giving that white clamshell VHS release that like swept through suburbia in the 90s like a tidal wave. You could not escape those VHSs. They were everywhere. I remember when we got one for my sister. I forget why she was in the hospital, but that was like a gift, and we watched that thing. We watched that thing a lot. Whereas Oliver and Company didn't come out on VHS till the mid-90s, so it missed my childhood almost completely. Whereas Little Mermaid was an impactful part of it. We had the cassette, we had so much of it. But I do think reached kids, and we just loved it. I do remember every little girl wanting to have their hair in the pool and pretending they were Little Mermaids at the time. And I think every girl does, even my daughter with red hair does. You know, the Ursula thing, Ursula is an interesting character. I have known almost my entire time of this film that she was based on Divine. I'm also from Baltimore, so it's sort of a bigger thing there than it would be for anyone else, I guess. First off, I do actually like the performance by Pat Carroll a lot. I don't want to be disrespectful, but in my mind, I wish it had been Divine. I feel like Divine died in 1988. It could have happened. I sort of wish it would. But any other recasting, I'm more on the level of I wish it had been Divine. I know Ursula is based on Divine to a certain degree. I would say Divine's whole persona and such, a little bit. Divine was a little more rambunctious than Ursula is. It would have been great to see Divine as actually as Ursula. I think Divine would have loved it. I don't know if Hairspray made Divine him mainstream enough for this, but I think Pat Carroll is great. I mean, no disrespect, but in my mind, when people are like, "Oh, it's Melissa McCarthy, should have been this," I mean, I think it should have been Divine every time, so I'm still there. But she was great. I love the thing in Poor Unfortunate Souls where she says body language. I had to ask poor little 5-year-old Jim had to ask, or 6-year-old Jim had to ask his mom what body language is, and she's like, "You know what you're doing with your body," and I was like, "What? I don't get it." Anyway, I get it now. Thanks, Ursula. I do also, this is a great performance, obviously, from Jodie Benson, who, oh my goodness, she's just so good in this movie. It is pretty remarkable. I think she also, not only does she do a great performance and you follow her and she's an amazing protagonist, throughout the film, the songs are great. I also want to say, I think she plays the immaturity. I think if anyone else had played her more stronger, or, you know, some of the lead princess casting is always great, usually in Disney, but I think the way you play her is you play her as a kid, and Jodie Benson got the immaturity to her as well as the strong-willed she was. All of that came through an amazing performance. Also, the Eric is played by Christopher Daniel Barnes, who you probably might know from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, as well as he was Greg Brady on the Brady Bunch movies. He's a great voice actor. I know everyone makes fun of him because sometimes he overacts and stuff, but he is legitimately great. As well as the guy who played the French guy, just because I think that's funny. I don't care. Sorry, French viewers. I like Samuel Wright, and Buddy Hackett, I guess. I don't know. He definitely annoyed people at the time. I think it's pretty obvious. But this also got re-released, interestingly enough. This is a aside, doesn't really connect. Right around the time Anastasia came out. So just, I guess, you know, they're like, Don Bluth fucked with us, we'll fuck with him, I guess. This is kind of funny. The Little Mermaid is essential in animation history because it signaled what was going to be coming from Disney and kind of the decade that was going to follow. It was a signal to a lot of people that things were definitely going to change. It was not trying to be modern and hitting your head over with it like Oliver and Company, and it was not kind of the sensibilities of Don Bluth. It really felt like Disney was back to their classic era once again. It seemed like people were getting sort of sick of the sketchier kind of Xerox style that they were known for and wanted that return to form that they would see re-released every 7 years or so. And Little Mermaid signaled that. But I think Little Mermaid isn't just that. Little Mermaid is something new. And that is what broke everything wide open. You get the I Want songs. You get the fun, you know, under the sea thing. You get this idea of following this female protagonist, but it felt like an event, I can say, at the time. It felt like this major motion picture. It felt like an achievement in animation, even with those like one CG steps that don't really work, but whatever, guys. It just felt like something that was like a massive achievement, but that also hugely related to you in a very universal, wonderful way. And I think it pushed the medium forward in a way because it acknowledged that things have to change, you have to be more modern, but it didn't hit you over the head with it. I think now when we do it, it's so showy and we bring it up and stuff. I mean, you look at her hair, she has 80s hair. Ariel, I mean, Ariel has 80s hair. All the dresses have very modern, like almost like Princess Diana at her wedding and stuff. It very much is playing into a modern 1989 audience, but like you wouldn't know it unless I told you those things. Like you don't think about it because the direction is so strong, the story is so strong, the songs are so strong, and you had an amazing, seriously murderers row of creative talent behind this. Ryan Clements and John Musker showed the greatness that we would see from them throughout their careers and why they had two monster hits, although this didn't actually break 100 million at the time, which is pretty insane to me, frankly, in an initial release. Don't worry, Disney movies always make money somehow. I think when I was a kid, what Little Mermaid always represented to me is like this finely tuned, amazing motion picture. And I remember people talking about like Disney was back, they're really making wonderful, great motion pictures again. That seemed to be like what people were saying. You know, I guess nobody liked Black Cauldron, I can't say I disagree. But this feels like a real, like kind of everybody loves kind of movie. And I think the thing is with Ariel and that Little Mermaid, you want her to be able to sort of achieve your dreams like you want to achieve your own dreams. And that is, I think, the power of this movie, that it makes you unselfishly want her to. While you can relate to her on such an incredible level, you feel like you're there with her in the grotto. You feel like, you know, you're in your, you know, sitting in your room, listening, you know, to music, thinking of a future that maybe one day you can achieve while you watch her dance in the sand and flip her hair and all those things. This is an impactful film because it feels personal, but at the same time, I think it feels like a big, modern, huge motion picture. I mean, at the same time, we talk about how great of a standout sequence this is and how it, you know, reaches to you and says something to you, and that's the part everyone remembers. But then, you know, 45 minutes later, Prince Eric is driving, you know, pointing part of a shipwrecked ship into a giant Ursula as she, you know, has King Triton's power sword and all this stuff. So like it completely takes on all those levels, but it does it so well. And I think you had this amazing direction team. You had these animators who were hungry, who were still there, who didn't leave for Don Bluth or anything. They wanted to prove something, and they did it. And these weren't guys who were, this wasn't their first movie. You can tell they knew what they were doing. There's a confidence in John Musker and Ron Clements' direction that I think cannot be undisputed in this. They knew what they were doing, and to a point where I'm shocked at some of the things they get away with. They just like leave details that don't matter. Like, let's just keep it going, let's keep it moving, and it moves in such an efficient way you don't even question what it's doing. You just accept it and you fall in love with it. That is populist filmmaking at its highest, and I think there's a reason people said I'm glad Disney is back, because Disney was looked at as a thing that the public enjoyed, the general public, everyone could enjoy, and Little Mermaid answered that call and gave us that. This kind of became like, what is a Disney film? What is the power of Disney? And it's interesting to see this new generation who grew up with Disney kind of respond to that and make their own thing, and then end up making probably one of the greatest Disney films of all time and reclaiming that crown for a whole new generation by frankly just making such an awe-inspiring, wonderful movie about a Little Mermaid who just kind of wanted to know what it was like to be human. So if you have seen The Little Mermaid 1989 and would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.